Hello, welcome to the Sounding Board, a weekly program produced and directed by the members of Probiotics International of Novato. I'm Sylvia Berry, and I will be your host today. Probiotics International of Novato is a local association of business and professional women whose primary mission is to improve the lives of women and girls, both locally and globally. The Sounding Board has been in existence for over 20 years. The program gives us the opportunity to discuss and learn about issues and topics that are near and dear to our heart. As a generation of baby boomers with kids in school while taking care of our elders, topics in nutrition that help us stay young and healthy become increasingly important to us. With that in mind, it is my pleasure to introduce Kulp, a registered dietitian. She will be talking to us about today's hot topic in nutrition. Hi Kim, before we jump into that, I was wondering if you can let us know what is a registered dietitian? What sets you apart from the others?
Thanks for asking, Sylvia. Registered dietitian is actually the credential for a nutritionist. The term nutritionist actually doesn't require any education or any particular regulation of what that means. But registered dietitian does require beyond a bachelor's degree for education in the sciences and in nutrition, and then a year-long supervised practice in a variety of different fields in nutrition, and then taking a national exam and continuing with education and staying on top of research to maintain your credential. So there is a big difference between the term registered dietitian and just nutritionist.
And I also understand that you work for a couple of hospitals. I was wondering, what do you do for them and what they are?
Yes, I do a variety of different things in the nutrition world, and it makes the work very interesting, and each part that I'm involved in helps bring experience that helps the others. So I do work currently at Santa Rosa Memorial Hospital as a clinical dietitian, where you work with patients, and I worked at Novato Community Hospital for a while as outpatient and clinical dietitian. Currently I have a private practice here in Marin County, both in Novato and in Mill Valley, where I see patients privately to help them with any nutrition problems or questions that they have.
Oh, that's great. I was wondering, what's your specialties?
They kind of cover three main areas, which sports nutrition. I would see people and work with them individually if they're training for races. I do work with a lot of the high school kids individually that want to get the most out of what they're eating for their sport.
That's great.
Particularly in a very competitive world right now, where the kids are often trying to do the best and trying to get scholarships. They want to make sure that they have everything in their corner, and nutrition is a big part of that. And I do speak at the various high schools to sports-specific teams on how they should be eating. And weight management is a big part of what I do, as well as medical nutrition therapy, and that's kind of a broad term that is specific to what dietitians do, which is using nutrition to help manage and hopefully prevent disease. And in that area, I focus mostly on gastrointestinal issues, so digestive health.
Okay. Also, I think that kind of brings us to our very first topic that I would like to ask you about. I heard a lot about gluten-free diet, and as a matter of fact, we went to a restaurant yesterday, and it says the new menu, gluten-free pan pasta or something like that. So tell me about that. You know, why? What is gluten, and why would anybody want to be gluten-free?
Yes, gluten-free is everywhere. It's very big right now. It's over a $2.6 billion business to create these gluten-free products, and which is good for people who really need to avoid gluten. Gluten can be found in wheat, rye, and barley, and it's actually a protein that's in those grains. And for some people, they need to avoid it. Now, the biggest problem with gluten is something called celiac disease. Are you familiar with that?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
If you can explain.
Celiac disease is actually an autoimmune disease, and it
okay.
affects about 1% of the population.
Mm-hmm.
And for those people, they really can't eat any gluten. It's similar to the way someone with an allergy would have to avoid something completely if they were gonna, if they had a really bad reaction. For people with celiac disease, gluten actually damages the lining of the small intestine, which interferes with nutrient absorption, and it can have some pretty severe side effects and be pretty damaging. There's also a small percentage of the population, and it's estimated to be about 7%, that are gluten intolerant. Now, for those people, there's no test to confirm that. With celiac disease, you can go to your doctor. There's blood tests that can test for the antibodies, and then they actually can do further testing to confirm that it actually is celiac disease. There aren't any tests for gluten intolerance. So people tend to either decide for themselves that maybe this is something that's going on, or they do it by kind of process of elimination. And in some of those cases, it may not be the best thing for them to do. Sometimes gluten intolerance is confused with something else in foods that could be causing problem. So at this point, you're talking about 1% of the population who may have celiac disease, and maybe about 7% with gluten intolerance. So that's 93% of the population who doesn't have any problem. And yet it's starting to become kind of trendy that gluten-free foods are better. And there's a lot of misunderstanding out there that gluten is not healthier. In fact, for people who don't have any problem with gluten, there's a lot of real benefits to eating foods with gluten, particularly something like wheat. If you don't have any problem with wheat, there are a lot of components of the wheat that can help with immune function, that we've seen actually lower blood pressure, so there's cardiovascular benefits. And one of the things that you may have been hearing about, and you're going to start hearing more if you haven't already, is how it benefits the gut bacteria. We're starting to find that what we have inside of us actually really benefits or can cause problems to our health. And some of this is in our control and some of it is beyond our control, unfortunately. But we're just starting to learn about it. But we have found that people who are able to eat wheat, that it actually benefits this gut bacteria. So avoiding wheat if you don't have to, or avoiding gluten, is not healthier. It is not better for weight loss. There's a lot of celebrities out there who have talked about how they've lost weight going gluten-free, and it's the greatest thing. And often what happens when people try to go gluten-free is they avoid particular groups of foods. And when you avoid a group of foods, sometimes you're eating less calories, and that may be where weight loss comes from. But actually, a lot of these products are actually higher in calories. So there's a lot of reasons to really understand, do you need to be gluten-free? And if you suspect that you have problems, symptoms can be gastrointestinal problems, digestive disorders. Sometimes with celiac, it can actually be headaches, there can be joint aches. Then you really need to see your doctor and get tested before you make decisions for yourself. Another area of, it's a big topic. Another area that sometimes gets confused for people with that think they need to be gluten-free is an area that I specialize in. And for people with IBS, are you familiar with what that is? Irritable bowel syndrome. And it's not something that people talk about as much at cocktail parties, but it does affect about 1 in 5 people, and mostly women. And for some people, it's really debilitating. They can't leave the house at certain times. They're afraid to eat and then get in their cars and be away from home. And it's really very uncontrollable problems, or a lot of pain. And sometimes for these people, they can actually get helped by a particular diet approach called FODMAPs. And it's an acronym that stands for fermentable oligo, di, mono, and saccharides and polyols.
Wow.
And what that is, it's a fancy term for different groups of carbohydrates that for some people don't get absorbed well and cause a lot of problems for people. And a lot of this research has actually come out of Australia, and we've found that people who are able to remove these foods from their diets and then slowly add them back in certain amounts are able to find about 75% reduction in symptoms. So it's really beneficial. Now, a lot of times this gets mixed up with that gluten-free, and people avoid gluten without realizing that there may be some other ways to go. You always want to have the least restrictive diet possible for anyone, so that they don't.
Most balanced.
Yeah, you don't want to cut out nutrients. And when you start cutting out groups of foods, you cut out nutrients.
And is that how you mostly, get your patients? They should go to their doctor instead of kind of like how do you say that?
Self-diagnose,
Yes.
Absolutely. You should always, if you have something that isn't right, you should definitely go to your doctor first. And things like IBS are often kind of, once the doctor's ruled out anything more that needs to be treated, sometimes someone will get a diagnosis of IBS, and in those cases working with a dietitian who specializes in that FODMAP approach can be really helpful.
Wow, that is a big topic. I thought we were just going to talk for 2 seconds.
Surprise.
Yeah, it is surprising. And I do remember many years ago people were saying that I stopped eating wheat and I lost weight, and so that's not really advisable for what you say. Yeah,
that's not necessarily the way to do it. No.
Yeah. So okay, and I'm also very curious about this other topic. I heard about it a lot. I have no idea what they are. So if you can explain that to me, that would be great. It's prebiotics and probiotics. What are they, and what can they do for us?
Okay, well, perfect question to come after we talked about gluten and gut bacteria. Probiotics are helpful bacteria, and it's what we would find naturally in yogurt. When you eat yogurt and it says live active cultures, those live active cultures are actually beneficial bacteria that change the milk into yogurt, and when we eat them, they actually can give us some positive benefits for health. There's also a lot of different companies now producing in almost like a tablet form or a powder or even sometimes liquids, these probiotics. And we're again just kind of at the tip of the iceberg in understanding how they can benefit us. Probiotics are very organism specific, meaning we know that there's certain bacteria that can help with certain situations. So the term probiotic, this general idea, doesn't always mean it's going to be helpful. But we found that for some people, after taking antibiotics, which kill off the bad bacteria, but it also can take some of the good bacteria, there can be certain probiotics that can be helpful. When you're traveling in some countries where you may have to worry about the water and people are a little bit more apt to have stomach bugs, there are certain probiotics that have been shown to be helpful. But again, it's those specific strains and the right dosage that we've studied to be able to say, we know this one in this amount can be helpful. So again, it's become very general term. A lot of people are just buying whatever they see. And so that may or may not be helpful. It's important to know which one may be beneficial to you, and are you taking the right one and the right amount. Prebiotics are what's supposed to feed the good bacteria in our systems. And that is naturally occurring in some foods. Things like bananas, onions, wheat have something in them that has prebiotic. It's also now being added to a lot of foods. If you ever see foods that say now with fiber, and they're foods that never would have naturally had fiber. Yogurt, again, is another one. Yogurt wouldn't normally have fiber. Fiber comes from a plant. It's the non-digestible part of a plant. So you wouldn't find it in yogurt. But they're now adding some of this prebiotic to yogurt and calling it a fiber. And while it has some benefits for some people, it can also cause some stomach disturbance for others, and it's part of that FODMAP that I talked about earlier. For some people, that could be a bit of a challenge to be eating. So again, you may be finding with these questions, there is no one answer for everybody. When it comes to these specific things that can bother someone or someone's particular health background, then nutrition can become much more individualized in its need.
That's very interesting because, yeah, I do know that in grocery store they have different kind of things over there for people to buy, and I guess that's just a way for people to spend a little bit more money.
Absolutely. These things are not cheap at all.
Oh, really? So that's interesting. So I think anything else to add to that subject?
Well, I think
that's pretty much
covering.
Yep. Okay.
Gut bacteria is a big one right now.
I know. From what you say, yes. Okay, my other one I have a question about is, of course, coconut oil, coconut water. And you see that all over the place, and, you know, a bottle here, a bottle there, and, you know, so why do they do that? You know, where does it come from, and, you know, what kind of benefits?
You're right. Coconut oil has suddenly become the new hot oil, and it's everywhere. I was surprised, you know, about a year ago walking into Trader Joe's, and there was a, you know, a display right in the middle of the floor, you know, right when you walked in, with jars and jars of coconut oil as the new healthy oil. And that's not necessarily the case. Coconut oil is a very highly saturated fat. Now, saturated fat is the kind of fat that we find in a lot of animal products, butter. It's what we found that increases your cholesterol levels, so it can lead to heart disease. It also tends to lead to inflammation, and inflammation is kind of this chronic immune response that we've seen that in people that can lead to more disease. So it's not a good thing to be constantly, you know, inflamed. It's a little bit different than the kind of stubbing your toe inflammation. But this saturated fat is higher in coconut oil than in butter, and yet what it's being advertised for is the fact that it can raise your HDL cholesterol, which is your good cholesterol. What they don't tell you is they've also found that it raises your LDL cholesterol, which is your bad cholesterol. And when your bad cholesterol goes up, you have more risk of heart disease. So it doesn't really live up to this, you know, good, positive, you know, health halo, as we call it, that it tends to have. It's also been touted as being better for weight loss. It's a fat, and fats are much more caloric than carbohydrates or proteins. They've looked at the makeup of the fat and have kind of made a stretch as to whether or not this kind of fat, called MCT oils, would be burned more quickly when someone were to eat it versus another type of fat, although the research has not supported that at all. So, you know, the jury's still out as to whether it's better than some other saturated fats, but overall it's the kind of fat that I tend to counsel my clients, patients, to avoid as much as possible. Certainly wouldn't want to buy a big jar of it and start cooking with it. I recommend and prefer myself olive oil and canola oil for cooking.
Yeah, that's what I use, so I'm doing well.
Good job.
So that's the one that they take from the meat of coconut and made it? And
right, they actually take the meat and press it to make the coconut milk, and then from that they take the cream and the fat off the top, which is very different than the coconut water that you had asked about. And the coconut water is if you open up a coconut and there's that little bit of water that's almost clear that's sitting in there. That's the coconut water, and that's been you know, again, it's become really big because it's high in electrolytes. Well, electrolytes, what does that mean? Coconut water is high in potassium and some calcium, a little bit of magnesium. Those are all good. And if you compare it, and this is what it's been compared to a lot, has been things like Gatorade for sports, that it's similar in its makeup.
So that's why you see them carrying around.
Right, and a lot of athletes are starting to use it. The only negative with coconut water compared to Gatorade is that coconut water doesn't have any sodium. And while we think about, you know, day to day we need to cut more sodium out of our diets, but as an athlete, when you sweat, you think it's salty, that's most of what you're losing is sodium. You really don't lose potassium when you sweat. So what these sports drinks really are for is they need to have some sugar in them, some carbohydrate, because that keeps you refueled, and they need to have some sodium. So the coconut water doesn't really have that. Gatorade almost doesn't have enough sodium for some real, you know, elite athletes. They need to actually add some more to their diet. So they're not quite comparable. Some people enjoy the flavor. It's like a juice. Certainly isn't harmful at all, and definitely has that positive with a good potassium, which we all, you know, can benefit from. But it has calories, and so it's always important to think what you're using it for. You know, if you're drinking extra coconut water because you think you're going to get extra health benefits on top of your normal diet, and you're not a big athlete, then it may not be a great choice.
That's kind of interesting. You know, I grew up in Taiwan, and we have the coconut tree there, and when there's typhoon, it's coconut falls, and we thought it was a treat.
Did you drink the water?
We drank the water, and we cut it open and ate the meat out of coconut. So yeah, we had a good time. But I guess probably not for this, huh?
Well, and as a treat, that's a great idea. We have to be real careful in this country right now with so much, so many people battling weight gain, as to, you know, when is something that we should be eating daily versus something that should be a treat.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Okay. How about moving on to my next question? Okay. You know, with kids being involved with the sports and whatnot, you see kids walk around the street or campus with this bottle of juice and whatnot, and I guess I find out it's called juicing. I always wonder what that means. So, is juicing good for you? Is it healthy for you? Is it good for your weight loss? And you know, juice bar and things like that. Are they different, Sam?
It's definitely a huge trend right now. You may have heard Starbucks has opened up the beginnings of their new juice health food bars, and so more are coming. And if you go to the farmers market, they have stalls there where people are juicing, and it can be some fruits, it can be vegetables, it can be a combination. And again, it really depends on what you're using it for. If you're someone who doesn't eat any fruits or vegetables, and it's the only way you'll eat it, you know, you'll consume them, then it may not be a bad choice. The thing that to be careful of is when you take fruits and vegetables and put them in a blender, if you're actually just getting the juice where all the peel and the pulp is being discarded, then you're actually missing a lot of the fiber and the beneficial part of the plant. And just drinking the juice concentrates a little bit more of the sugar. So juice isn't always a great idea for people. If you're putting it all in a blender and you're drinking more like a smoothie, then you are getting the full benefit of the fruits and vegetables. But again, you have to be careful as to what's going in there and how often you're drinking it. Is it for a meal, or is it in place of, in addition to a meal? So if you're eating normal breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and then going to the juice bar and getting your smoothie every day because you think this is a great idea, you could be easily getting 100 to 200 or more extra calories. Some of those juices that are sold at some of the current juice places can be up to 300-400 calories sometimes. And we know that an extra 100 calories a day can translate into 10 pounds in a year. So you really have to decide, is this a good thing for me? The other thing is it a meal replacement? Because if you were to just drink some vegetable juice and call that lunch, you're missing out on something that's going to keep you full. You know, if it doesn't have protein in it, it doesn't have fiber or a lot of fiber or fats, it would be like eating a cup of soup for lunch with nothing else. And pretty quickly you'll be hungry again. So again, is this giving you sustained energy for the day? Is this keeping you hungry enough so you don't overeat at the next meal? And the other part of that is, you know, a lot of times they're throwing protein powders and things like that into these. And, you know, do you want to really be eating these protein powders, you need that. You know, some people make them at home and use their own Greek yogurt or another high protein source to make it more of a meal, and that's not a bad idea at all. And they're expensive. You know, these smoothies can be $8 a cup. So you have to make that choice for yourself. The other thing with drinking your food is to know that we digest liquids much more quickly. So a lot of times people are choosing juicing thinking it's going to be a weight loss plan. And if you drink something, you're more apt to be hungry much more quickly than if you took those same fruits and vegetables and put them on a plate with your meal and ate them. The other thing is our brains don't always signal that we've had the same amount of calories when we drink it. There seems to be kind of a disconnect that we don't calculate those calories internally the same way as when we eat. And again, you're more apt to be hungry or to overeat at the next meal. So if you don't have a weight problem and you don't eat fruits and vegetables and you enjoy this, those are all things to take into consideration whether or not juicing is right for you. Is it healthier than eating your fruits and vegetables? I say no.
Okay, so I guess you're going to put Jamba Juice out of business. We won't say that. Okay. Okay. And I think the other thing I was reading in the newspaper not too long ago is really talk about childhood obesity. And I believe in Marin County we have, or Novato and San Rafael, we have pretty high percentage of that. So what do we do as parents to prevent that from happening? What do you see out there?
There's a lot of things that are going on right now that are really beneficial in our communities, and this is a big emphasis in community health, is how to combat childhood obesity. And here in Novato, we're lucky that in the school district we have the food service director, Miguel Villarreal, who's done a fabulous job in bringing in local produce into the meals and really trying to get more kids involved with eating fruits and vegetables, going out in the fields. Some kids go out and volunteer to glean the fields. The food comes back to the school district. They've taught families how to prepare soups from some of the local and seasonal vegetables. So there's some really positive things going on in the community. As a parent, it's really important to start early, and modeling is huge. You know, you can't expect a child to eat a certain way if you don't do it yourself. And it's a challenge today. We're really busy. Everybody's really busy, and a lot of times kids are in the car running from one event to another. Parents are trying to feed them, in between events. And it's an interesting study that these kids in sports that we have, we put our kids in sports really early here, and it's terrific. But at the same time, there's a culture of giving the kids more junk food. There's always a snack time after a sport, even if very little has been, energy has been expended. Even these little tiny kids are getting a snack that can be cookies or chips or something after going to their t-ball practice. And that kind of continues, and it's not unusual to be able to just stop and grab some fast food as you're busy, and it's important to make sure that you do model the good food and provide it for your kids.
Well, thank you, Kim. I really appreciate that, all your good advice to us today. And how do we find you if we have, our audience have some questions about that?
Well, I have a website. My company is Health Tastes Great, so you can find me at www.healthtastesgreat.com. And I have an office here in Novato and Mill Valley, and I would be very happy to meet with anybody that has any other questions.
Great. Thank you again. And I want to thank you, the viewers of Sounding Board, and I hope we get to see you next time. And also we want to thank Novato Public Access TV, especially Lee Young and Rick, for helping us every week to produce this program. And thank you to the members of Sorapness International Novato for putting this program up. See you next time.